Today on Nerd of the Rings, we're taking a tour of Middle-earth as it exists during the First Age, specifically the lands of Beleriand, which factor heavily in the events of the Silmarillion. In later videos, we'll cover the lands of Middle-earth as they appear in the Second and Third Ages. The first thing we'll take a look at is how the land of Beleriand fits with the lands of the Second and Third Ages that we know so well. Now, this map isn't accurate in that it depicts realms from all three ages simultaneously, but it gives us a good sense of place for Middle-earth as a whole. During the First Age, the vast majority of Eriador is a gigantic forest, which by the Third Age is reduced to just Fangorn. But for today, we're just concentrating on Beleriand. This is the land where nearly all the events of the First Age take place. We'll begin our tour in the northeast. We start with the land of Lammoth, where Ungoliant would turn on Morgoth and he would be rescued by his Balrogs. In the south of Lammoth lies Losgard, the place where Feanor's people landed their ships and he subsequently burned them. South across the Firth of Drengist lies the lands of Nevrast. While he would later be known for ruling Gondolin, Turgon founds the dwelling of Vinyamar along the coast as his first settlement in Beleriand. After the elves leave for Gondolin, this area would largely be empty of inhabitants, aside from animals. Going a bit north, Hithlum is a larger realm that lies east of Lammoth. This realm was led by Feanor's half-brother, Fingolfin. Fingolfin rules from the mountain fortress of Barad Eithel. Within Hithlum are two smaller realms important in their own right. Dor-lomin is a realm of men of the First Age, the Edain, most notably Húrin and his son Turin. Dor-lomin is one of many realms to factor heavily in the Children of Húrin. The other smaller realm within Hithlum is Mithrim, site of the Dagor-nuin-Giliath, the Battle Under Stars, one of the earliest battles between the elves and Morgoth, in which Feanor is mortally wounded. Here you'll notice a familiar name, Minas Tirith. That's right, there was once a different Minas Tirith than the one we know from The Lord of the Rings. This one was built by Galadriel's brother Finrod Felagund around the year 60 of the First Age. Nearly 400 years later, it is captured by Sauron in the aftermath of the Dagor-Bragollach and is renamed Tol-in-Gaurhoth, the Isle of Werewolves. One of the greatest elven cities to ever exist is Gondolin. Even after Morgoth gains control of the north of Beleriand, he still has fear, purely due to the threat of the hidden city. Its fall in 510 of the First Age is one of the most devastating blows in the war against Morgoth. Continuing our journey across the north, we have the great desert plain of Anfauglith. At one point, this was a green plain known as Ardgallan, but was scorched by the forces of Morgoth during the Dagor-Bragollach. Dorthonion is a forested region which would also fall under Morgoth's dominion after the Battle of Sudden Flame, after which it is known as Tar Nufuin, Forest Under Nightshade. Beren and his father Barahir would lead a group of outlaws in causing trouble for the orcs of Tar Nufuin, after they are forced from their homes in the land of Ladros. Just south of Dorthonion, we have the arid Gorgoroth, the Mountains of Terror. This was the area where Ungoliant made her temporary home after her confrontation with Morgoth's Balrogs. There she spawned many evil spiders. Due to Ungoliant and her spiders, the valley to the south becomes known as Nan Dungortheb, the Valley of Dreadful Death. In one of his most impressive feats, Beren takes this path when he leaves Dorthonion and makes his way to the forest of Neldoreth, where he meets Lúthien. In the northmost area of Beleriand, we have the Iron Mountains, where Morgoth dwells deep in his fortress of Angband, beneath the three peaks of Thangorodrim. In the northeast of Beleriand lies the lands of Lothlin, where we find the hill of Himring. Maithros, the eldest son of Feanor, built his stronghold on the hill. This fortress is notable as it manages to stand after the Dagor-Bragollach, despite the lands around it being overtaken by the Dark Lord. Another interesting note about Himring is that a portion of it survived the destruction of Beleriand at the end of the War of Wrath. While most all of Beleriand sinks into the sea, the hill of Himring becomes the small island of Himling. Now back to the First Age. Caranthir, another son of Feanor, and his people lived around Lake Helivorn, an area which was taken over after the Battle of Sudden Flame. We also see here the northern portion of the Blue Mountains, much of which also survives the destruction of Beleriand, but we'll cover them more in just a minute. Heading back to the west of Beleriand, we have the coastal region of Falas. Círdan the Shipwright was the lord over this group of elves, who had havens at Elgarest and Brithombar. The Tower of Barad Nimras, yet another construction of Finrod, was created to watch the western seas. Soon after the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Morgoth's forces attacked Falas, destroying the tower and sacking the realm. Círdan and his people would flee south to the Bay of Balar. He establishes a refuge on the Isle of Balar. Here at the Havens of Sirion is where the third kinslaying would take place, where elves were slain by their own kind in pursuit of the Silmarils. As we travel north, we come to another mighty kingdom of the elves, Nargothrond. This realm is founded in 52 of the First Age by Finrod, and where he would rule for the rest of his life. This is another important location during the Silmarillion and the Children of Húrin. In 495 of the First Age, it would be destroyed by a force of Morgoth led by the dragon Glaurung. To the northeast of Nargothrond lies the great hill of Amon-Ruth. This is the hill where Mim the petty dwarf lived with his sons, and would, rather reluctantly, share it with Turin and his band of outlaws. This group, also known as the Gorokhova, or Wolfmen, would come to plague the orcs in the region. Due north of Amon-Ruth, we have the Mannish realm of Brethil. This area was gifted to the men of the House of Haleth by King Thingol, as it was previously a part of Doriath, though it laid outside the protection of the Girdle of Melian. The Girdle of Melian being a magic border of Thingol's wife, who was Amaya. It is in Brethil that Glaurung, Turin, and Nienor would meet their demise. Heading west, we have the Forest of Neldoreth. This was a beech forest and the previously mentioned location of the first meeting of Beren and Lúthien. These woods were within the Girdle of Melian and part of the larger realm of Doriath, under Lúthien's father, King Thingol. Menegroth is the capital, which was an underground fortress. It's very similar to Thranduil's halls in Mirkwood in the Third Age, which would make sense as Thranduil and his father Orofer were both citizens of Doriath during the First Age. The forest of Nan Elmoth was where Thingol first met Melian. Later, Eol the Dark Elf would live there for a time, with his wife Eithel and their son Maiglin, before they would return to Gondolin and each have tragic ends of their own. Now you may be getting to the point where you're kind of wondering, where are the dwarves? We're kind of running out of map here. Well, the dwarves of the First Age had two cities in the Blue Mountains, Belegost and Nogrod. These realms were actually founded prior to a lot of the elven cities and realms we've covered thus far. Belegost and Nogrod are founded by the two fathers of the dwarves who awoke in the Blue Mountains sometime during the Years of the Trees. These dwarves were known as the Broadbeams and the Firebeards. Their cities also survived the destruction of Beleriand, though 20 years into the Second Age, most of the remaining dwarves would abandon these realms and move to Khazad-dûm. There they would join the Longbeards, or Durin's folk. As we make our way southwest, we see Amon Ereb, a lonely hill that Caranthir would fortify after losing Lake Helivorn after the Dagor-Bragalach. Ramdal marks the end of Andram, a long wall of hills through central Beleriand. To the south, we have the mysterious Tol-in-Gaurhoth, the forest between rivers. It's a dark and gloomy forest where no one ever wandered, save for a few of the Avari elves, those who first refused the invitation of the Valar to live in Valinor. Finally, we have the realm of Osiriand, inhabited by the Green Elves. This area is largely untouched by the wars of the First Age, though it would still sink into the sea after the War of Wrath. It is marked by its 6 parallel rivers and is also home to Tol Gallen. This is the small green isle where Beren and Lúthien would live after they are granted a second mortal life by the Valar. So there you have it, a tour of the lands of Beleriand, the primary location for the First Age of Middle-earth. In future installments, I'll cover the maps of the Second Age, which sees the aftermath of Beleriand's destruction, and the Third Age, which we all know from the events of The Lord of the Rings. If you enjoyed this video and would like deeper dives into the realms of Middle-earth, let me know what you'd like to see in the comments. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters, including Tom DeBombadil19, Gail Elizabeth, Jim Limber Davis, Sky Carcass, Salim Rahman, Smorzerk, Zetrock, Gimmelkad, Grand Strategy Nerd, Debbie, Chief 40123, Mid-Earth Wellness, and the Dark-Haired One. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.